Hey, so this is Julie with the People's Network, and I'm excited to be interviewing Nicki Truesdell today. And I'm going to be asking her about all of the tips. She probably doesn't have time to share all of them, but her words of wisdom for anyone who's considering homeschooling. There's lots of different considerations that people have to make and lots of reasons why people think they can't do it. But really excited, Nicki, to ask you about your wisdom and your experiences that you have to offer. Because I know it can be kind of daunting for someone who's just kind of like had a break finally with like, okay, the public school system, we can't do that anymore, but how the heck do I start with homeschooling? But so tell me about yourself to start with, like a little bit about.
Okay. Well, I've been in the homeschooling world for 41 years now. I was a public school kid in the 80s until my mom and dad heard about homeschooling and decided that they were going to do this too. And so they took my sister and me out of public school when I was 11 and homeschooled us. And I mean, this was when it wasn't popular. There were no co-ops, there was no internet, very few curriculum options and support groups available, but they had this conviction and they had met some people who were already doing it and were willing to sort of mentor them through the process. And so, yeah, that started in 1983. And I was homeschooled up until my senior year, at which point I asked to attend a private school that was local to us with some friends. So I did that and graduated from a local Christian school. And then I went on to college and got a business degree and got married and had my first two daughters. And when my oldest was 5, I formally started homeschooling her. When she was 6, we ran away from my abusive husband. And so I had two little girls. We'd already started homeschooling, and I kind of had to start life all over. And so we did. We started with nothing but a car and our belongings, and I had a couple $100 in the bank. And so I found myself as a single mom. I had not been working for a while, so I had to start all over with that. And I already knew that I was going to homeschool my kids. And so it became one of those circumstances where I wasn't going to send them to school, but I had to figure out what was I going to do instead. If I was single, I had no home, no job, no money. How is this going to work?
You
But
had every excuse in the world
yeah,
to not continue to homeschool them.
yeah. But I'm really thankful that I had that upbringing already because it showed me how homeschooling is possible in many circumstances, including working parents, very low income, and if we did it when I was growing up without the internet and without co-ops and all the different opportunities we have now, I knew I could do it. And so I did. And it wasn't easy, and I wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone, but I was determined that my daughters weren't going to go to public school. And so they didn't. And we figured it out one day at a time. And what I learned was that it's just school supplies and books and parenting. It's not this whole other production. You don't have to be a certified teacher. You don't have to have any kind of expertise in education or set up a classroom in your home or, set aside your whole life from Monday through Friday from 8 to 3. It's not that at all. And realizing that and putting that into practice in 100 different ways is what got us through. And even after I remarried and we had a much more normal life, circumstances kept popping up. We moved several times. We were in a very low income situation. I was on bed rest with multiple pregnancies. I've had migraines my whole life. And so all these little things that are inconvenient and might even make people say, I couldn't do it because of this. We just kept going and kept going and kept going because home education was just part of our life. It wasn't this separate thing that we were doing during the week. It was just life. And we learned how to adapt everything around our lifestyle, whether it was, having documentaries for history one day or having school through the summer, which we learned to appreciate, not worrying about what day it was or what time it was or what month it was, any of that. We just learned how to live life and educate along the way. And so that's that was 24 years ago when I started homeschooling my kids. And so those two little girls that started out with me as a single mom, they're grown. One of them is married and has children, and I have three more kids after them, and only two of them left at home. So through all of that, I learned so many things about homeschooling, not only from my experience with my parents, but through quite a few different circumstances that are difficult and sometimes unpleasant. And I started sharing that with people after 15 years or so. And it finally led me to write a book. I wrote Anyone Can Homeschool. And I wrote that based on a lot of the experiences I had, but also the experiences of a lot of other people who have been single or who have been working parents, who have special needs children. Sometimes it's a grandparent homeschooling or a parent who has their own medical needs. There's so many different things that make people think they can't homeschool, and that's what my book is there to, um, just kinda bust those myths, and what I do is try to help people understand what homeschooling actually is, and I write about it every day, I tweet about it every day, and I wrote the book, and I talk to moms and dads all the time and just say, "Yes, you can do this," because what you're imagining school is not what homeschooling is at all. If you picture the public school class, um, throw that out of your mind, and like you never heard of it, and let me tell you what home education actually is. And so that's me. That's what I do. That's why I'm here. I love to encourage people that is very possible. It's affordable, and it's actually to teach your kids at home.
What is that driving reason, your why? Because, you've committed yourself obviously to this cause and to helping empower other people to homeschool. Why is that?
Gosh, I've had so many reasons over the years, but I think the overarching reason for homeschooling my kids is that I don't want them in the public school system being raised with it's definitely a Marxist worldview, and I don't want that for my kids. I don't want them to believe things that have led people down through history into a disbelief in God, into atheism, and not understanding the creator of the world. Kids study science without the God who created the world, and they study history without understanding the beliefs and the worldviews of all the people throughout history that have made history. And so much is left out. There's no neutral education. And so some of these people who say, "Oh, you're indoctrinating your kids," um, everyone is indoctrinating kids in some way. And if I am, then so is the school, but they're doing it in a way that is dangerous. And I recently reshared an old article that I wrote on Christian education and how just talking about the origins of the world makes such a difference in how you see the whole world, how you see life and marriage and nature, and so many things are affected just by, do you believe that God created the world, or did it just come from nothing? And so all of that it's just saturated throughout the public school education. It's not just a course in science, and it's not just a history lesson about Darwin or whatever. It's a worldview that saturates all of public education. And I don't want my kids being brought up in that for 13 plus years of their life if I can offer them the complete opposite. And so for me, it's not just peer pressure or drugs and alcohol or any of those things. It's that and so much more. It's a worldview, and worldview is everything. And that's what we do here. We do it the complete opposite of public school. And so I try to help parents understand that it's not just, taking your kids to a different location. It is a whole different education. It's a completely different upbringing. And so my goal is to help them see it's not hard, it's not expensive, it's not impossible, but it's extremely important. And I think everyone should do it.
Yeah, I mean, so I also went to school in the 80s and the early 90s,
Mhm.
and just my own personal experience with public school. I mean, I did burn out in high school, and I was very driven to excel when I was in
Yeah.
school, and I pushed myself too hard. I actually had a decent education. I did not have any bad indoctrination in terms of like against a Christian worldview. And even believe it or not, I studied biology in college. And the head of the biology department, I went to Florida State University, number one party school in the country at the time. And I studied biology. The head of the biology department was an open Christian.
Oh,
He
wow.
he taught we had to take evolution was one of the classes we took that you had to take to get your degree in biology. He taught the class, the one when I took it. We did not go into macroevolution, which is evolution between species.
Hmm.
All the whole course was on microevolution, which was adaptation within a species. And
Hmm.
he got up one time during the class and said, "We're not going into macroevolution because it's almost completely scientifically improbable that
Wow.
there's evolution between species. There's no evidence of that. So
Wow.
we're not going into that here."
That's amazing. I'm
He and
sure it was much more normal, decades ago.
Yeah, and he even said there's way more evidence for it to be it for that it was a divine,
Wow.
intelligent design. So that was my experience with not just public K through 12, but going to a public university. But that's not the case now for
No.
99.9%. And this is what people need to understand, even where the teachers are well intended, the
Hmm.
curriculum creators at this point. Because when I went to school, most of my teachers created their own curricula.
Hmm.
My dad was in the military. We moved every 3 years. I went to several schools. I went to three elementary schools. I went to two high schools. Across the country. So I sampled many different types of public schools.
Hmm.
Some were better than others, but the teachers created their own curricula. If you had a good teacher, there was amazing things that were happening. So that I'm coming from that experience,
Hmm.
but uh, but that's not the case today. Today and we have a whole other course that people can look at, and of course watch Beneath Sheep's Clothing to understand the Marxist agendas in the schools if they haven't looked at that yet. What we have today is public education is the ultimate wolf in sheep's clothing.
It is.
And
Well,
especially
and I
people
believe
like me. Go ahead.
I
You
was
were
just going to say there are a lot of really, like you said, well-intentioned teachers. There are nice Christian people teaching, but if they're using the curriculum that's given to them by the state, they're still teaching an anti-biblical worldview. As nice and friendly as they are still propagating this.
yeah.
And so you have to be aware of, like you said, what has changed over the decades and how it is the public school.
But I will say this, even with the above average public school experience that I had, what
Mhm.
school did do for me that was negative that I had to unlearn was it because I've been an entrepreneur now since say 2005. So 19 years I've been self-employed. I had to unlearn a lot of things that I learned in school in order to be, not that I've been the most successful self-employed individual, but like self-employment, entrepreneurship and homeschool, there's a lot of common
Yeah,
skill sets there of being self-motivated and things like that. I had to unlearn, being a cog in the system in order to
yeah,
succeed in any way, shape, or form in business.
that's
So
a very important point.
yes. And I think that alone makes homeschooling very valuable. So so what are some of the things? I mean, there's so many different things. We talked a little bit before. I'm a single mom as well. I have one child who has some special needs, and you were telling me that you have some chapters in your book that go into like different type of extenuating circumstances. I'd love for you
Yes.
to share some examples of people who have, and even from yourself, of some creative solutions for how people, because we all can have different excuses as to why we just can't do it. What are some creative solutions that people have and do employ?
I'd say overall, it's there's a lot of different solutions, but overall, understanding that you don't have to be in most states on anyone's calendar. You don't have to follow a certain schedule or curriculum as long as you are teaching your children and you're progressing and you're always moving forward. You don't have to do it the way the state does it. And understanding that is what frees people up who have a special needs child or work full-time or part-time or at home or work two jobs. There's so many people doing this. I think it's still, even though homeschooling is growing, people still don't understand how many hundreds and thousands of people are all around them already doing this in these difficult situations. And so what I try to help people understand is just to think outside of the box. Whatever your situation is, think outside the box. Don't try to recreate the public school at home because you're not a public school. And I say this all the time on my social media. You're a school, you're not a school, you are a family. And so operate like a family. If your child has special dietary needs, then you make substitutions. You figure out what's going to work and you do that instead of what everybody else is eating. It's the same thing with their education. You figure out what is going to help this child and how can I provide that for them. And so if you have a special needs child, sometimes you might find a counselor or a tutor that specializes in what they need. Maybe you adjust the curriculum, or maybe you ditch the curriculum depending on the child and their need. And they might learn visually through more video adaptations, or maybe you read aloud to them instead of forcing them to read everything in their textbook, or maybe you let them answer things out loud instead of forcing them to do worksheets. There's so many things, and I just say adapt, adapt, adapt. If you are a working parent, single parent, adapt around your schedule. So you can have school on Tuesday nights and all day Saturday if that's what works for you, because you're not a school. You don't have a schedule to keep like the state. You're not on anyone else's timeline. So adapt everything to what your needs are and what your children's needs are. If your money is tight and you have none at all, you can still homeschool, because that's how I did it. And so borrow books from the library, ask friends, can I see your book? Can I trade with you? Go to a used homeschool book sale and get stuff. I taught my two boys to read from a book that cost $3. It was Teach Your Child to Read in 100 Easy Lessons. I got it used for $3. Still have the copies. I've already passed it down to my daughter to teach her son with. So it is not expensive if you don't want it to be. Get together with other people and do group activities together if you want your kids to have some, classroom or group experiences. Everything that the public schools do, you can do, and you can do it so much better and cheaper and a lot more fun. And so that's, no matter what the circumstances, I say just adapt. Adapt to whatever your needs are, because it's your house and it's your family, and that's all that matters.
So what would you say to the person, because I've heard this excuse a lot, and then it's an excuse that, I mean, I have to admit, sometimes I threaten my son that I'm going to send him back to school to get, he's not he's not the most cooperative child. He's very headstrong. And so
What?
yeah, he has a
I
lot
don't
of
know those kind of kids at all.
yeah, he has a lot of time to explore his own interests, and he just turned 10 a few weeks ago. He's building with electronic components. He's
Uh-huh.
taught himself how to code. He's building his website. He
That's fun.
engineers different things. He's going to be an engineer. He already knows he is. He's a total engineer.
That's
And
cool.
so I keep telling him, he does fairly well in math, but he's doing long division right now, and it's not really his favorite. Um, but what was my point? I just lost my point.
You were talking about just you don't want to threaten to send him back to public
Okay.
school.
Yeah. Okay, so sometimes, like, sometimes I have threatened him, like, okay, come on, we can do homeschool. And by the way, homeschool does not take all day. Like, my son is in fourth grade, and I spend maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours, 4 days a
Mhm.
week doing,
Yep.
curriculum.
Which is why you can adjust your schedule however you need to, because you're not spending 7 or 8 hours a day.
And he's not getting a substandard education because
Right.
it's just, and then what I've told people is, like, it's the same as if you go to the gym with, you have like a coach, or I mean, I
Hmm.
have one child, so it's one-on-one, but even a
Yeah.
family, you have like a trainer for like a small group versus like a large class, fitness
Hmm.
class, where most of the time you're just standing around waiting for the
Yeah.
exercise equipment and for someone to actually interact with you.
Exactly.
And so most of that time in school is behavioral management stuff. It's not actual
It
academic.
is, and that's actually even what a teaching degree consists of mostly is managing, and not the education. At least half of it is the first 2 years of basics that everybody has to get. And then you've got 2 years left to learn all about managing classrooms and state standards. But how much of that is how to teach these kids certain things? And it's not much. I have so many friends who have teaching degrees that ended up homeschooling their kids, and they said, "This degree did not help me homeschool. It gave me the tools I needed to manage a public school classroom." And so it does, like you said, it doesn't take all day long, which is why it is so adaptable. And yet at the same time, you get to provide them a quality education because you're focusing on what's important. What I say to people is it is rigorous and relaxed at the same time because the schedule is yours and you get to focus on what's necessary and important without all of the time wasters that a teacher with a classroom full of kids uses to keep people busy. You don't have to do a bunch of multiple choice worksheets or, regurgitate every book that you read into some sort of report. That's not necessary. You can have a short conversation with your kid and find out what they loved about a book or what they hated about the book. And you don't have to give them a multiple choice quiz after every lesson. You can talk if you're going over it with them, you're already knowing. I mean, you know what they've learned, you know what they haven't learned and where they need more work. And so, man, there's so much waste cut out of a homeschool education.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's still very focused and solid.
But what would you say to the parents? And then back to this question that I was asking originally. Like, "Oh, I just don't have the patience. Like I tried it and like
Mm.
it drove me crazy." It's like, okay, join the club. I mean,
Well,
to be honest. So what do you say to people who have that as their reason?
It's actually a valid concern because if you're not used to being with your kids all day, every day, it's a shock a lot of times, especially if you've got some strong-willed kids. And so, what I always recommend to anyone who's taking their kids out of public school is to take some time. We call it deschooling, but just take some time and do nothing and get to know your kids, establish some routines like, chores, enforce the chores, teach the chores, make sure they do the chores, and then maybe start adding in some small educational activities. And you're kind of testing the waters to see how is this going to go. How do they respond to my full-time authority? Because it's easier sometimes, I think, when at least you've got this time where they're under the teacher's authority or the principal or the coach. But when it's you full time, yeah, there's no break, and you're kind of in a whole different parenting mode. And so give yourself that time and give your kids that time for all of you to be together a lot. People talk about in the summertime, they're so excited for their kids to go back to school. You're not going to have that. And so you're going to be the one enforcing behavioral patterns and um, teaching them right from wrong and then dealing with the consequences. And that's the hard part. I think that's what, when you send your kids to school full time, what you are missing a lot of. And it's not to condemn parents for that, but that's reality. If someone else is with your kids most of the day, you're not dealing with a lot of the discipline. And so I would say get used to the discipline stuff first, set a routine, and then slowly start adding in the academic stuff. Maybe start with the basics like math and language arts, and realize that every time you add a new layer to your homeschooling, there's going to probably be some behavior problems that pop up, and you're going to deal with them and then you're going to move on and you and the kids will get used to it. And so it's not that homeschool parents are all the patient ones. We aren't all the patient ones. It's just that we figured out that this is a very full-time parenting job. We're raising kids, we're educating kids, we're disciplining kids, and we're teaching them how to interact with each other. I mean, this is socialization. People think the homeschoolers don't get it. You get it in your house before you even walk out the door. You get it in your house by learning to interact with whoever lives in your house. And so you're teaching them how to behave, how to interact with people, how to be kind, and maybe not to be grumpy, or how not to take up people's time and take their things, and how not to cry when things don't go your way, including a math problem. So all of that does require patience, and the parents have to learn that all through this process. It's not something that you just have. Sorry if that's not the answer anyone was looking for.
No, no. I really, again, once again, just think of someone who's quitting a job and starting to work for themselves. It's a similar type of learning curve of like how
Yeah.
to operate as an independent entity, how to manage your time, how to
Yeah.
organize your time, how to have the correct level of challenge and rigorousness and de-stressing.
Yeah.
And
And to have fun, you
yeah.
know, it's not all work. And that's something, too, that people who work for themselves sometimes get caught up in, and that's just becoming a workaholic at home.
Mhm.
I know because I'm the same way. And my husband that I'm married to now, when we first got married, I was running a business, and he came from an employee situation to help run the business with me. And he always says, it was so weird telling him what to do. We just, I was the boss and I got to choose what to do. And I felt like I was doing something wrong. And I think you're right. It's very similar to homeschooling. You all of a sudden are in charge of everything. And there's a lot to be in charge of. But again, that's a good thing. It's so much freedom, even though it is more responsibility. It's so much freedom too. And you and your children are going to benefit so much from that freedom.
I mean, I feel really blessed that I'm homeschooling in this era, and then there's tons of homeschoolers in my area. There's literally every single day of the week,
Yeah.
we could be doing some kind of activity. My son's at a homeschool activity right now, and there's no shortage of people to,
That's how it is where we live too, in this area, and it's a rural area. Our town has about a 16,000 population. It's a small town, small county, and but there have been homeschoolers here for my whole life because I grew up here, and it just keeps growing, and the support is amazing. Just knowing other people are doing the same thing, but also having, like you said, so many options. We could do something every day of the week and leave the house every single day and be getting all of our classes and education and socialization and all the fun stuff too. It is an amazing time to be homeschooling.
so one little thing I want to throw out there for single working parents. I mean, I work from home, so it makes it a little easier to homeschool.
Mhm.
But I started finding, because I'm on year 4, a homeschool family with like a lot of kids, with like maybe like a 13, 14-year-old girl who I could like drop my son off once or twice a week in the afternoon
Mhm.
and pay the girl to babysit, and then my son can play with the younger siblings.
Mhm.
Um, and then I have more time to work. That's something that I started doing and was
That's
very
very smart.
cool.
That's
Uh,
actually something I recommend, finding a homeschool family that you can partner with in so many different ways. And as a working parent too, if you have to go to work, because I had to do that too. I've worked from home, but I also had to work outside the home and homeschool. Find someone who's sympathetic to homeschooling and wants to support what you're doing and not just be a daycare, but a partner with you. And it can be someone's grandmother or a former teacher or just a family in your church, somebody that understands what you're doing and they will help you. This lady that I hired, it was just a part-time babysitter, but she was so willing to do fun things with the girls and even help with some school lessons if I wanted her to. And so it's really helpful to find someone who gets what you're doing and why.
yeah. I mean, I wish, and there's even more support. I'm in Utah, and there's 2 different programs that give you, well, there's a third one, but I'm a little sketched out by it because I won't go into that. But I get $1,800 per year for the curricula of my choice and school supplies, extracurricular stuff. And so, but like even without that, notebook, pencil, library
Yeah.
books,
Library, internet.
and
Oh
YouTube.
my
I'm sorry,
gosh.
there's so much
YouTube.
great stuff on YouTube. There's
Yeah, I still use YouTube for so many things. You can take a field trip to somewhere that you can't go, or tour museums across the world, or learn how to solve this algebra problem. I mean, there's so many things you can do with the internet.
I think these kids, these homeschool kids, again, back to entrepreneurship, and then even there's like entrepreneur homeschool fairs where I live, where they like
Yes.
markets where they have the kids make their own whatever they're going to sell, and
Yeah.
have different markets. And I haven't done that with my son yet, but he's really excited about wanting to do that at some point. And this is one of the things we need more of in our country. We need more entrepreneurs and people who are able to be self-employed, uh, and who are not dependent on, big whatever to give them a job. So, what are some other nuggets, that anything that you have that you want to add, to someone who, any of the excuses they might have, like, I don't think I can do this. We've discussed money. We've talked about the patience thing. Um, talked about, you know, single parents, working parents. What are some of the other big excuses and things that you can share that might help someone see that they can do this?
One of the most common excuses I hear is that I don't feel qualified. And so I just have to share my story again. I mentioned earlier that my parents took me and my sister out of public school in the 1980s. But what I didn't mention, and this is in my book too, my mom dropped out of school in the ninth grade. And she was a teenage mom with me at 14. She never went back to school. And eventually after I was in my teens when she went and got her GED. But without even a high school diploma, she started homeschooling because she had mentors who encouraged her and helped her. And she had a curriculum that had the answers. And so, not graduating from high school did not hamper her in any way from becoming a homeschool mom. And she homeschooled my sister and me to the point where we both graduated high school, and I went on to college and got a bachelor's degree. It's not about having all kinds of knowledge in your head and remembering everything you learned in high school and going to college. There's so many non-college degreed parents out there that are homeschooling their kids. And so it doesn't matter what you already know or remember because the homeschool curriculum market is amazing. It's amazing. And that's something else that I think a lot of people don't realize is there's a whole world of curriculum that you probably don't even know exists. And there's something for every family, every learning style, every budget, every parent who does or does not know anything. It's not impossible at all to teach your kids things that you didn't even learn. In fact, one of the most common things I hear from homeschool moms is, I love this. I did not like history at all when I was growing up, and now I love it because I wasn't taught this way. And so they're seeing what awesome ways there are to teach and all these really neat materials to give your kids and to use with your kids. And so if you think you're not qualified, I just want to say it's because we live in a society where everybody has to be an expert before they can do anything. But don't fall for that. Don't fall for the experts idea. Just get you some curriculum, get the teacher guide. It has the answers in it. If you still need help, talk to other homeschoolers, go on YouTube. It is not that hard to teach your kids. And I know this makes college graduates and teachers with a certificate very angry when I say it, but hello, 40 plus years of homeschooling, I can tell you that this is the absolute truth.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And like I will say I struggled when I was starting to do math with my son, and not because I didn't know basic math, because I didn't know how to teach it.
Yeah.
If it wasn't working what I was doing, but I got a math curriculum, Math UC.
Yeah.
There's the
That's what we use.
videos. Mr. Demi
Yes.
teaches the concepts, and my son gets to have the same math teacher for as long as we're using this curriculum. We're
Yes.
on year 4 of it now. And he likes Mr. Demi. Mr. Demi explains things very well. And it's like a five
I
minute
know.
video. And then
Oh,
I
I'm not a math person at all, and his videos help me to be the teacher. It reminds me, oh yeah, that's how you do that. Because I don't like math and I never did, but I don't have to teach my kids and to help them with the curriculum.
Yeah, and then like for science, last year I was really busy with finishing my film last fall.
Mhm.
And so I did a little bit more hands-off homeschool with my son. And so for his science, I bought him some science sets that he was building different things more independently. This year we're doing more of a standard, I don't even want to say standard. We're doing more of a curriculum for
Uh-huh.
science. Um, I did research on YouTube. By the way, I highly recommend for people not to just do, there's all these like little like adaptive learning curricula, online curricula. I highly encourage people not to use those with their kids because they're embedded with the same Marxist stuff that
Yes,
the schools are. So we don't do any of that stuff, and I highly recommend people do not rely on those
I agree.
at all. So, but there's so much curriculum. I just went on YouTube and I was like, okay, first grade homeschool curriculum. Boom, 20 videos popped up. And I got
Yeah.
to see however many videos I had time to watch of homeschool moms saying, this is what we got for this year for my daughter and this, or my son, and this is what has worked, blah, blah, blah. And you get to see different people's
Yes.
perspectives. And then in my area, they also had like a curriculum fair where people just show up and bring your curriculum, lay it on a table and share what
Yeah.
you like and don't like. And so I got to look through some books that I had been wondering about. And then there's Well-Educated Heart. We use their book lists quite a lot. Quite a lot of those books are in the library, my
Hmm.
public library. And I really love teaching history and social studies through reading beautiful books.
Yeah, me too. Well, another thing too that I just want to say is in this talk, we focused on, like, here's all the problems and here's how we solve them. But it's even more than that. It's fun. It's fun to be with your kids. And I know some people are not quite there yet, but it is fun. Once you work out some of the kinks of being together all the time, it's fun to give your kids a really personalized education. Just like you said, your son wants to be an engineer. And so you're already getting to give him things that are just for him. If you had 5 kids, you wouldn't be giving all 5 of your kids the very same thing. I have 5 kids. Each one of them has had a slightly different education because they're individuals. And so what one of mine has done, the next one might not do, but she's going to do some very personalized stuff. I've got kids who are artists. I've got kids who are, more like you, the engineering type or the critical thinkers. And it's fun to just explore what they're interested in and let them chase rabbit trails and obsess about something. If they obsess about soldiers and they love world wars or whatever, that's great. Let them do it. Let them spend a whole year on that instead of saying, "Oh no, the curriculum says we got to do this by this time." No, you don't have to do that. Use your curriculum, but be the boss of it and let your kids really become individuals who have their own interests. And like you said, it's very similar to the entrepreneur mindset. This is the same way. Don't worry that your kid knows way more about World War II than they know about the French Revolution. Some people need a very niche interest and they may become experts at something very interesting, and that's going to affect who they become as an adult and how they impact the world. And so if you've got someone that wants to learn robotics or someone that wants to bake or just know everything there is to know about horses, do it. Go all in on that stuff and don't worry if you're not checking off every tiny little history lesson or, every single English concept. All of that will come. Read lots of books. Read lots of books together, separately, individually, whatever. And let your kids be individuals. That's one of the neatest things about homeschooling, in my opinion.
I completely agree. Well, I really enjoyed this conversation. Tell us where can people get your book? Where can people follow you and learn more about what you have to offer?
Okay, so Anyone Can Homeschool is on Amazon. It's also on my website, nickitruesdell.com, just my name. And on my blog, I have been writing about schooling for, gosh, since 2009. So there's a lot of stuff on there. There's a Homeschool 101 page. So if you're just getting into the idea of homeschooling, that page on my website is kind of an orderly list of blog posts that you can read, and it's a great place to start your research. And then I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and X. And I also have a website and a bookstore where I actually take old history books and reprint them. And so it's books like this that were printed. This one was, I think, printed in 1818, and it's biographies of the signers of the Declaration of Independence, things like that. Diary of the Pilgrims. This is an autobiography of a former slave. And so that's just a separate thing that I do to bring back the old primary sources and get people to read them and own them and keep them in their homes. Because, as you know, with this whole delving into Marxism, the printed word is important, printed history is very important. And so, um, one of my obsessions is getting people to read the old stuff and not let it disappear into the trash bin of history or memory hold, as George Orwell said. And so I do a lot of republishing of these old books, and that's at knowledgekeepersbookstore.com. And I also do write free study guides for homeschoolers to use these books with any homeschool curriculum that they have. And so on social media, I just talk about homeschooling every single day, and I try to encourage, and people can message me if they have questions. And I also do homeschool consultations, and that's on my website too. So
Oh,
yeah,
awesome.
that's what I'm here to talk about.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time and your expertise, and very,
Thank
very
you.
grateful.
I'm
And
glad to be here. And I'm really appreciative of what you're doing too. It's very important.
thank you. All right. Well, I hope our paths cross again, and
Me
at
too.
least I'll be seeing you on X because I see your posts on there pretty frequently.
Okay.
So thank you
Thank
so much,
you.
Nick.